We've covered the nominative and accusative and genitive. Now on to the dative. A couple of weeks here in chapter 4. This will be modules 7 and 8 for us, and thinking about the dative. The dative, exegetically, homiletically significant, and I hope in the few examples that we notice here in Kostenberger, Merkel, and Plummer, and then in Colossians, will give you a doorway to understanding the dative throughout the New Testament in the various genres of the New Testament. In epistles, how it functions in narrative, and even in apocalyptic. So a good bit here to cover, and I trust that as you're now several weeks into class and getting into the routines, that the Lord is yet encouraging you in His Word. And I hope that the dative noun case here will stimulate you even further. Let's pray and ask the Lord's help toward that end. Lord, I'm so thankful for your word, for these students, for the opportunity to teach them, and I pray that you will give us attention to your word this week. I pray that you'll help students to see the way that the dative carries meaning exegetically, in understanding your word and in making it known in preaching. I pray especially for those who preach your word on a regular basis, that you'll help them to interact with these noun cases and put ideas together, and that you will bless them and the people they preach to from your word, even because of this lecture and the time here in modules 7 and 8. We ask this in your Son's name. Amen. The dative, often thought the indirect object, and in elementary Greek, first year Greek, again, we're just thinking about identifying one part of speech and distinguishing it from another. So we think about nouns and we distinguish them from verbs, from participles, and so forth. And in the noun cases, we just distinguish one from another and think basically about what each case does. And here in second year Greek, and Kostenberger, Merkel, and Plummer, just as other second year Greek grammars would do, we think about classifying those individual cases. And that's what we're doing here with the dative. We have several categories of dative here: the pure dative or simple dative, the locative dative or a location dative with place, sphere, or temporal categories, the instrumental dative, dative of means, manner, agency, association, and then some other uses that we'll look at as well, including the object of the preposition. Not a specific category listed in KMP, but a very important category nonetheless. And again, they deal with this further in chapter 12, but I want to point it out with you here, and we'll notice some in Colossians. To begin, as we have noted, examples may overlap. Just as with the genitive, one particular category may explain a genitive on its own. That category completely explains a particular example in a text. But it's often the case that one or more options could be possible in explaining that particular noun. And the same with the dative, and we'll see that as we progress here. So keep in mind some overlap. We begin with the pure dative. There are 4 subcategories listed here, but essentially there are just 3. The indirect object is sort of a head category. It's the structural idea of the pure dative, and it breaks down into exegetical categories, if you will: personal interest, reference, respect, possession. In other words, this is the structural, the most basic idea, but these other categories provide meaning. To say that a dative is an indirect object doesn't say all that much. It's the indirect object of the action. It's not the accusative. It's not the direct object. Here in our example, das doxon to theo. Again, throughout the video, pause it, try to repeat the Greek after me, and just do your best to keep up on that. Das doxon to theo, the imperative, you give glory to God. doxon is our direct object, the accusative, to theo, the indirect object. But there's a sense in which, just to say it's the indirect object, leaves us wanting. Does it say something about the personal interest, advantage or disadvantage? Is it in reference respect to something? Is that dative actually possessing the noun in view, the subject? So we come back even here to theo, and there's a sense in which this glory is to the advantage of God, or could be thought that way. Not that we give God anything he doesn't have or advantage him, but in a sense his praise, the praise we give to him, advantages him. And this would be especially true of the datives in the Psalms and the Septuagint of God. Psalm 82, God takes his seat amongst the gods. There's a sense in the worldview of the day where there's competition amongst gods, and Yahweh is the God. And this is one way to think about this. Though, again, just the indirect object, structural, but try to think of subcategories that could further define that dative. That's what we're after. And we have personal interest is a main category, the advantage or disadvantage of the dative. And here from Revelation 21:12, hos nymphein kekos menein to andriates, like a bride adorned for her husband, for his advantage, to andri, for his advantage, or disadvantage. So Herodias held a grudge against him. He de Herodias Anakin auto. The disadvantage that John the Baptist had in relation to Herodias and the grudge against him because of his preaching. It was to his disadvantage. There's a sense in which to andri and auto are both indirect objects, but that doesn't say enough. When we come to a dative, we want to think, okay, it's indirect, object of the action in view, but is there another subcategory that would help to explain it? Personal interest, advantage or disadvantage is one of those categories. Another, just reference respect. Here we have a limitation, the extent to which something is presented as true. Now, we recognize that this idea of limitation we've seen already with the accusative. The accusative limits the action generally. The dative limits it specifically, often to a person or to a specific idea. Te hamartia apethonen ephapax. He died to sin once for all. In reference respect to sin, he died. And the reference respect limits the idea of death here, qualifying. He died with reference to, with respect to sin. Another category, possession. And here we have some overlap. I have an asterisk here to remind us that examples may fit in one category or another. And here there's a sense in which advantage, when it's to an extreme degree, is possessive. If that dative is to such an advantageous position, it may actually own the subject of an equative verb. The key here is this equative verb, a me, ginomai, and uses of it across first, second, third person, and so forth. For the promise is for you, humingar estin he epangalia. The promise is yours. And we have the dative with the verb of being. So, pure datives, simple datives, the indirect object is the basic category, and then look for a subcategory with exegetical specificity. Moving on, the second main category of datives, locative, showing a location, place, sphere, or time. The place category, the dative pinpoints. It shows the with the exact specificity, if you will, the specific location of a noun in the dative. Here we see tous periauton kuklo kathemenus, those who were sitting in a circle around him. The dative of place is more specific than the dative of sphere. The dative of sphere identifies a more figurative or metaphorical location. And here, Mark 8:12, to pneumati, in his spirit. It's a spherical idea. In these references of spirit, heart, mind, these are, obviously we understand them with some specificity, but they are less specific than a specific place. Dative of time indicates a specific point in time. Here, John 2:1, kai te hemera te trite gamos agenita, on the third day, a point in time. And that's what the dative provides. On page 129 in the textbook, the authors provide an example from the end of Luke 23, beginning of Luke 24, where we have the accusative of time, stating a duration of time, the dative of time, a specific point in time, and the genitive of time, a quality of time, a kind of time, in just one verse. And you may want to take a look at that, page 129. And this, on the Sabbath, on the first day, very early in the morning. And that will help you to just see the interplay of the three noun cases and the temporal idea in each of those cases. So we have the simple or pure dative. The indirect object is the structural general category of the dative, but in the simple datives there are subcategories. The locative dative, more specific yet. In the context it's obvious, place or sphere or time. And then the instrumental dative. And all of these have a degree of homiletical, exegetical importance to them, and I think the instrumental datives do in some ways that are going to be helpful for you in your ministry, and as I've thought about here with you and prayed already. The key question, how is the action accomplished? It's by something or with something or someone. It's by an object, means, or by a person, agency, or it is with some characteristic or manner, or it is with some individual or body. So, how is the action accomplished? We begin by means of. Very common category of datives. By means of an impersonal object. Stones here, lithois. Katakopton hauton lithois, cutting himself with stones. Stones are the instrumental, impersonal means. Let's move down to agency, because these can be easily confused. I've highlighted in green here impersonal, personal to distinguish them. And once we think about that, the designation is easier. By means of or by the agency is a person by which the action of a given verb is accomplished. And most often, it's a passive verb because the subject is passive. The subject embedded in the verb here from ago, but if you are led by the Spirit, ago, second plural passive, it's the Spirit doing the leading. The dative agent is the actor, and in effect becomes the actor of the verb because the verb is passive. So it's the dative of agency. The dative is the agent doing the action. The subject of the verb is passive. So means, some kind of an instrument, agency, a person, normally with a passive verb. How is the action accomplished? By means of something or by someone, a dative of agency. Or how is the action accomplished? With and with. Here, manner, with a certain manner or character, denotes the characteristic. And these have a special homiletical importance to them. These preach, that is to say. No pun intended here, with open speech, Mark 8:32, parousia ton logon elale. He was openly talking about this. Parousia here, openly. Adverbs, and if you've been in ministry for a while or heard many sermons, done much teaching, you recognize that adverbs, they're not so helpful for academic writing. They tend to make things more ambiguous, but in a preaching context, they help to emphasize certain ideas. And the New Testament has many of these, and I would suggest you follow them and recognize in Acts how often the dative of manner occurs, especially in speech kinds of contexts, but others as well. So, how is the action accomplished? By means of an impersonal object, by means of a person with a certain character or characteristic, with an associated group or individual. Often, the association instrumental dative includes soon, prefixed to a verb or a participle, or just as a preposition, and the dative follows it. Suntaphentis auto ento baptismo, having been buried with him, there's our participle, with him in baptism. We are associated with him. These, again, a good bit of exegetical significance here in Colossians. Romans 6 would be another place where these ideas stand tall and carry a good bit of weight for us. Moving on then to other uses finally. The dative of cause, providing the basis or reason of the action of a verb. And these also have homiletical significance. We'll see this even in Colossians here in a few moments. The cognate dative, similar to means or manner noted above, but the cognate dative stands as a separate category because the dative noun has the same stem as the verb it modifies, in a formal way or just at the conceptual level. And we'll see this also in Colossians. Circumcised with a circumcision not done with hands. We'll see in Colossians 2:11. Circumcise the verb, with a circumcision the dative. And an example here from Mark 5:42 as well. Ex esteson, extase megale. They were utterly astonished. Here's our verb, ex esteson, they were astonished. Extase becomes utterly. The dative, we could think of this as a dative of manner, but it is a cognate of the verb. So a more specific category yet than just manner because of the cognate relationship with the verb. Apposition. The second dative specifies the head dative or the first dative. And ento Beelzebul, archontai ton diamonion, by Beelzebul, here's our first dative, the ruler, second dative of the demons. Beelzebul doesn't decline, but we know its case from the article. And so archonti modifying Beelzebul. Direct object, the dative occurs after certain verbs of discipleship especially. The dative occurs after trusting, obeying, serving, worshiping, thanksgiving. This is my term, verbs of discipleship, but it helps me to remember the way that these various verbs take the dative as the direct object. We would normally think the accusative, but here the dative functions as the direct object and provides a bit of a personal relationship with the direct object. And the verbs of discipleship do that. I've noted already for us the object of the preposition. We'll see these in Colossians in a moment. See page 137, footnote 63, and Harris's book on prepositions and theology. So very helpful. But we'll see some of these. Just note that that category is worth our time and attention. Let's think about Colossians for just a few moments here. We'll come back to looking at Colossians just in my Bible there, but let's take a look at some examples in Colossians. We'll begin with Colossians 2:9 here, and auto. Hati en auto. This is the dative object of the preposition en. That's what you would put here, object of the preposition. And there are various ways to specify objects of the preposition. And here we would think of a spherical idea, in the sphere of him, in relation to him. And again, those ideas are covered more fully in chapter 12 in the textbook, but I want you to recognize how frequently the dative is the object of a preposition and fill those in even here. Let's go to verse 11. Enho kai peri et methete peritome. I noted this earlier. Peritome, circumcision. Peri et methete, circumcised, in whom also you were circumcised with a circumcision not done with hands. This is that cognate relationship. The dative has a cognate relationship with the verb. It comes from the same stem, and you see it here. Go down to verse 12 with me. Syntophantus auto, the soon prefix. I noted that a few moments ago. What specific category does the soon prefix often go with in the dative? You'll want to fill that in. Let's jump down to verse 13. Kai humas necrus ontos tois per optomasen kai te akrabustia, and you, being dead, necrus, dead, the accusative, the n, debatable here with the brackets, in reference to respect perhaps to transgressions and uncleanness, akrabustia, uncircumcision, in the situation of life that you were in, you being dead, uncircumcision of your flesh. Here, this is dative of cause, both of these. Dative of cause functioning together. We can go down and look at a couple of other datives here. Go to verse 13 toward the end with me. Being forgiven, chemen. The chemen here seems to present the audience in an advantageous position. I'm going to think about that in the context and how the dative functions there. Verse 14. Ex alepsos ta kath chemon, ker agraphon tois dogmason. This tois dogmason, with its stipulations, the idea of association here, the handwritten, he is taken out of the way that was against us, with its requirements, its dogmas. association. How does stauro function as a dative? You'll want to think about that. The preposition here, and parousia, a preposition, and auto. C. Harris, in thinking about this final dative, en auto, it's here the object of the preposition, but what does the preposition refer to? Auto. It's dative singular, but what would its antecedent be? Take a look at Harris, page 100, and that will give you some further insight. Let's note just a couple here in this paragraph. Go down with me to the midway point here in verse 16. Halagos tu Christou enoiketo en gemin plusios en passe Sophia. Let the word of Christ dwell among you richly. En passe Sophia. How is Sophia functioning there? Didaskantes kai nuthetuntes, teaching and admonishing how tus, you all, psalmois, hymnois, odiais, pneumatikais, ente kariti, odontos. There is a relationship between odontos and these three words. Odontos, the participle, and these three datives. When we have a relationship between a dative or a series of datives and the actual verb, what category is that? Finally here, eucharistuntes, giving thanks to God. This is one of those verbs of discipleship, giving thanks. So totheo would be what? All right, let's take a look at those and fill in the open book exercise, just as we've been doing. Let's take a look for a moment at a text critical issue. Here in Colossians 2, I have my Bible open here, and again, the marking system that I use, participles are red, verbs are blue, I underline in green, prepositions and the object of the preposition, I use black for infinitives, just a general structure. Again, I hope you're marking somehow and it's helping you to read. But let's look at verse 15. We looked at this a moment ago, or I noted it in the open book exercise. Apek du samenos tos arkos kaitos exousios epidegmatison, get that pronounced right with the acute here, edegmatison in parousia, triambusos autus en auto. Apek du samenos tos arkos, having disarmed, tos arkos kai tos exousios, the rulers and the authorities, edegmatison, triumphing over them, putting them on display in parousia, making a show, a bold show within parousia here. But I want us to notice the absence of something here that's added rather in a couple of manuscripts. Go down to verse 15 with me. And chi in both P46 and B. How many times have we noticed that P46 and B have a variant that is the same? Here in verse 13, I believe we noticed that as well at one point. So we have these patterns. It's not conclusive, but it does seem interesting that they follow suit in some places. Let's notice that here. Again, Study Center for the Study of New Testament Manuscripts, P46, and this particular manuscript, again, housed in Dublin, the Chester Beatty Library, and we have permission to look at this manuscript here for our class and to notice how the manuscripts show the various texts and the wordings. Here, stauro for cross, apec du som, and notice the nomina sacra here, an abbreviated form. Apec du som menus, toss, and we go on down. It's a little tougher to read that last line, but we come here. This chi that is inserted, if you have your Greek text open in verse 15, right before adegmatisen, right here in paresia. That chi is here in P46. It's not there listed by the editors as the most likely reading, but it is here in P46. I want you to notice as well in Vaticanus. The chi right here is the connecting between tos archos, kai tos exousios, chi. The same chi here is in P46 right there. Come back to Vaticanus. Chi adegmatisen en paresia triambiousos to ento auto chemon. Moving a little more quickly there, I want to just call our attention especially there to this chi. Adegmatisen made a show in paresia, triumphing over triambiousos autou, in auto, triumphing over them in him or in it. It's that auto there at the end of verse 15. And then the meun begins the next verse. But this chi, the same chi as right here. But now go to Sinaiticus, and that chi is not there. Tos archos, chi tos, tau alpha, and then a little sigma there. And then that is an epsilon, exousios, and here we do not have the chi. Adegmatisen right there. That where the little hand is would be the chi in P46 and Vaticanus. So just again, this relationship between these two manuscripts, and I want to point it out to you there and there. Wrapping up then, let's look at vocab here for a few moments. Let me open this up a little more so that you can take a look. Apongelo here, where this is chapter 1, and down to where we are in chapter 5, and moving through here, or chapter 4 rather, modules 7 and 8. These are your vocab, and again, no substitute for keeping up on vocab. The listing here will continue on, and we are cumulative all the way through the class. So let me pronounce just a few of these, and you can feel free to pause and then repeat after me. Let's do just a few here in this section. Ide, look, see, behold. Judas, Jude, Judah, Judas. Kaisar, Kaiseros. Caesar, Macaria, Machaira, not Macaria, Machaira, sword. Mimnaskemai, I remember or recall. Miseo, misthos. Perakleses, encouragement. Peraklesis, kleseos. Parerkamai, pascha. Just a few of the words here in chapter 4 and module 7 and then in module 8.